それでは時間になりましたので、本日のセミナーを開始いたします。本日は ASA、CCI、コーポレートカタリストインディア、並びに横浜インディアセンター様、共催によりますセミナーにご参加いただきまして、誠にありがとうございます。私は ASA、CCI でアドバイザーをしております河野和春と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。本日は PLI、生産連動型優遇策、これの概要についてお話をいたします。モディ首相が、主導いたしますメイクインインディア、これをさらに進める形で、現在自立するインディアという施策を展開しております。これはインドにおける製造業全体の推進、技術レベルの向上、あるいはスケールの拡大といったものにより、世界の製造業のハブ、あるいは輸出拠点、ひいてはグローバルサプライチェーンの重要な構成要素にならんと、そういう目的を持って今推進しているものでございます。現在、この PLI というのが、その自立するインディア、これを支援する一つの施策として打ち出されておりますが、インドにおける強みのある製造業の分野、あるいはこれから力を入れていかなければいけないという分野、特にその中で最先端のテクノロジー、あるいはインドにない技術を導入していこうというような企業に対してこれを優遇して支援していこうという趣旨のものでございます。インドに設立している企業を対象にですね、2019年の実績を基準といたしまして、毎年それに加わる投資増額分、あるいは、生産、売上の、増加分、こういうものを対象にある一定の規定のもとに、ファイナンシャルのサポートをするというのがこの PLI の骨子でございます。私個人の感想から言いますと、非常にインド的な内容といいますか、なかなか複雑でですね、難しいという印象を持っております。現在13の製造分野というのを対象にして、それぞれ申請、これの申請を受け付けている状態でございますけれども、この条件の申請条件というのは非常に高いレベルにあるようです。日本の企業もいくつかこれの申請に動いているようでございますが、中小企業にとってはですね、まだ厳しい条件のレベルだというように聞いております。日系企業の中でもなかなか難しいなと思われるところがあるようで、現在インド政府に対してこの条件の緩和というものを正式に要望しているというようなことを聞いております。本日お話をいたしますのは、弊社の役員で日系企業も担当いたします Himanshu Srivastava でございます。英語での講演となりますけれども、同じ内容のものを皆様のご覧になる画面に投影いたします。皆様のご理解の一助としていただければというふうに思っております。皆様からのご質問でございますけれども、画面にありますチャットボックス、ここにご記入いただきます。内容の性格からしてですね、お答えに関しては正確性を保つために、後ほど一つ一つすべてにメールでお答えをいたします。チャットボックスへのご記入よろしくお願いいたします。それからもう一つ、横浜インドセンター様からのアンケートがございます。後ほどチャットボックス内にアンケート用紙にアクセスする URL が掲載されます。ぜひアクセスしていただいて、横浜インドセンター様のアンケートにお答えいただきますようにお願いをいたします。ご協力いただいた方には、本日使用します説明の資料、これのコピーをシェアするというふうに考えておりますので、どうぞよろしくお願いします。本日概要でございますけれども、実際にもうこの PLI の活用をご検討されているような県庁法人の方、おられましたらですね、いろいろなご不明の点、あるいはご相談事ありましたら、遠慮なく弊社衛生 CCI の方にお声掛けいただければと思います。真摯に対応させていただきたいというふうに思いますので、よろしくお願い申し上げます。それでは本題の方に入りたいと思います。Himanshu-san, it's your turn, please.
Thank you very much, Kono-san. I wish I could speak the language Nihongo as beautifully as you, but thank you for covering up. I intend to share my knowledge with everybody who spared time today. I thank Yokohama India Center and all other audience who are attending and who are making this possible. Thank you very much. So the topic for today is production linked incentive. As Kono-san has already explained, that this is not very recent, but since last 1 year, Government of India has been trying to attract investments into India. Primarily objective is to increase the investment, and the more broader objective is to create local supply chain protection. We have all seen there was no country which did not suffer due to COVID in last 1.5 years. And more so, every industry which initially suffered is now slowly recovering. But there is a general feeling amongst all our clients and all companies that they want to create more predictable and less risky supply chain. So in this view, since industry is thinking on these terms or this initiative, it was felt that the government should also encourage the companies to think on creating more dependable supply chains, backward linkage or forward linkage, or trying to bring the whole value chain into India, so that if there is any future risk or future incident, then the disruption will be much lesser or no disruption. So with this initiative, the government has prepared some budget of cash incentive. This is not some discount. This is actual cash which will be given to the companies who meet the conditions for different sectors. There are different possibilities. So I will explain this, try to give you an overview of these conditions today. And if you have any queries, I would be more than pleased to answer them. So I've already given a background, but still, for the purpose of your knowledge, let me mention that the government of India in last year, 2020, had announced certain initiative called Atmanirbhar Bharat. This was a promotion of efficient, equitable, and resilient manufacturing in the manufacturing sector in the country. So the promotion of manufacturing sector and creation of conducive environment will not only enable integration with global supply, but also help to establish backward and forward linkage with MSME sector in India. It is expected this will lead to overall growth in the economy and create huge employment opportunity. So the objective of this PLI scheme, which will be implemented by the government ministries and department within the overall financial limit, is to make India manufacturing globally competitive, make Indian manufacturing globally competitive, and attract investment in certain areas. Then encourage cutting-edge technology to come to India. For example, we have seen that now, because of this scheme, iPhones are predicted, or iPhones will be manufactured in India. iPhone vendors have relocated their production bases to India. So it's been a success so far. Ensure efficiencies in the manufacturing, create economies of scale, and then enhance exports from India. This will also make India as an integral part of the global supply chain. So this is the total budget. This is expressed in billions. So these were the 13 sectors which have been announced, and this is the total budget the government has promised that they will give as cashback. So it's a huge budget, as you all can see. Mobile manufacturing, this budget is already under implementation, as I mentioned.
Himanshu-san, the different page you're showing. You're showing the sectors, and so yes. From 1 to 13, different sectors.
Yes, 1 to 13. 1 to 13, I'm just showing the budget of the government of India in all the 13 sectors.
Okay.
So, for example, for mobile manufacturing, 409.51 is a budget billion. Similarly, for point number 6, auto ancillary, the total budget of the government is 260 billion INR. So I'm just trying to show how much money the companies in these sectors are eligible to receive back from the government. For example, number 12 is white good, air conditioning and LED manufacturing. Nearly 62 billion government is trying to give back to the companies. I will move to the next slide now. So please don't misunderstand me. I've just made this slide to show you that under various schemes, under these 13 schemes which I showed on the previous slide, based on my information, what all companies can claim these investment. And I'm sure there are similar companies or different companies, for example, who might be into medical devices other than Omron, Nipro, Toshiba, Smax, Nihon Kohden, or Shimadzu. There may be other very famous but local Japanese companies who might be eligible for these kind of investment. For example, in pharmaceutical drug, point number 7, I have mentioned some name, and there may be more. So please don't misunderstand me. I'm just giving you some example, and just to show you, if you think that you are also in the similar category or you are competing with these companies, then this could be a very good opportunity for you also to consider these schemes. I will now move on to some details wherein I would analyze some PLI scheme. For example, I cannot cover all the 13 schemes in 1 hour, but all I'm trying to do is that I will cover major schemes which I think are beneficial for Japanese companies, or there is a considerable presence of Japanese companies into India. So first one I'm going to be covering is a production linked incentive scheme for air conditioning and LED sector. So based on the scheme, this was announced on 16th of April 2021 this year, and this scheme is monitored by Government of India. They have created some empowered group of secretaries, EGOS, who will monitor the outgo of the funds under the scheme. So the target segments under the scheme are three. One is AC, air conditioning components, high value intermediaries, and low value intermediaries. So as you can see on the right hand side, I have mentioned high value intermediary and low value intermediaries, then compressor, copper tube, control assemblies, display panels, motor, cross flow fan, heat exchanger, sheet metal component, and plastic molding component. So just to give you an example, I have taken serial number 1 to explain you how the scheme will work. So this is a very simple, I know it may look very technical, but it's a very simple summary of the whole scheme, just to tell you how the scheme will work. For example, the incentive in the scheme would range from 4 to 6%, and the eligibility is subject to achievement of thresholds which are given for the incremental sales of the eligible product in respective financial year over a base year. So the base year as defined by the government is 2019, 1920, 2019-20 is the base year, over which you have to show that you have increased the investment and you have increased the sales also. So the government has said that we will calculate 1920 as a base year, because after 1920, as we all know, because of COVID, there was disruption and the sales did not happen as per the normal course of business. So it is it's a very considerate scheme by the Government of India that they have selected the base year trying to be a normal year. So as you can see, this is the year. This is PLI benefit, as I mentioned to you, 4 to 6%. Then this is minimum cumulative incremental investment. How much investment a big manufacturing company has to make, but there are other limits also for small manufacturing company. So please don't misunderstand that this amount looks very huge. There are for other product, the investment limit is much smaller, and I can explain to you one-on-one how this will be effective in your product or your product area. Next column is minimum net incremental sale. This is the incentive amount that will accrue to the companies if they meet the incentive threshold. This is how it will be dispersed, that they will claim in this year and they will receive in the next following year. As you can see, I have mentioned that if your company or somebody you know is meeting all the criteria for 22-23, which is the next year, if they make sales, incremental sales of 7,500 and make investment of 3,000 million INR million, they will get this much of incentive from the government. So in summary, you can understand that if these companies are making 6,000 million INR investment in India, they're receiving back 4,800 as an incentive from the Government of India. So it's only 20% that is not coming back. So in a way, I would say that because of this investment, even if the company is not making any profit from other sources, at least this much would be the profit. I hope you understand that by making investment of 6,000 million INR, you're receiving 4,800 million INR as a cashback from the government. And because of other factors, if the overall profit is zero, but because you will receive cashback from the government in particular years, it will become the profit. So overall, this scheme will contribute to a very healthy global balance sheet and also Indian balance sheet. Obviously, there will be certain tax impact, but I would say that this will be a big motivator for those companies who are keen to start their manufacturing in India. But please note, I have mentioned a condition here that if for any reason, global reason or specific reason to the company, these investment amount or these sales amount are not achieved in a particular year. For example, in the financial year 25-26, this year, if you cannot achieve the total investment and your investment is not 6,000 but maybe 5,000, for only this year you will not be receiving the incentive. Otherwise, for all other years, you will receive the incentive. So government has been very fair that for any reason, if you don't achieve the sales turnover, or if you unable to meet the investment criteria, then you are not completely disallowed. You will still achieve you will still earn the incentive from the government as long as you meet the other conditions. So although I have explained this, but still let me give you a summary of what is the formula. So you need to calculate the net incremental sales of eligible product multiplied by rate of incentive. That is, eligible product will be defined in the approval letter. You will when you make an application, you will say that we will manufacture certain component or we will manufacture a part. That will be mentioned in the approval letter. Then you need to calculate the net incremental sales turnover of the previous financial year over the sales turnover of the base year, which I told you, financial year 19-20. If there is any captive consumption, that is, you are manufacturing something in-house and you are using it, that can also be considered at a fair value, at a transaction value, which is offered to the group companies. And if there are any sales return, they will be calculated at average of 4 years for previous financial year, because every product will have some sales return. So you don't have to wait for the actual sales return to complete. They may come next year, after 2 years or 3 years, depending upon product warranty. But you can assume an average sales return and you can calculate the incentive. So I would say operationally and administratively, the scheme is very intelligent. And then as far as investment is concerned, expenditure in consumables on raw material are not considered. The date of capitalization, so whatever investment in land, in building or plant and machinery you're using, the day when you actually capitalize it and you recognize it in your financial and audited balance sheet will be considered the right financial year for the purpose of calculation of investments. And similarly, heads of investment, whether it is plant and machinery or furniture fixture or some intangible asset or building or related to factory building, those heads of investments have to be clearly defined in the balance sheet. Second hand equipment and refurbished equipment are not to be considered for the purpose of this scheme. So then there is certain pre-qualification criteria. The applicant should be an Indian company and must have received the foreign direct investment in a bank account in India. Then you need to achieve minimum committed investment, as I've already explained. Minimum threshold of assets, revenue, and net worth have to be achieved. There may be some relaxation by the government in that. Set up a manufacturing facility, whether a fresh greenfield project or by acquiring any company in India, any existing company in India, you can still be eligible for the scheme. Quality and testing parameters are required to be met. With Japanese, I know this is not a concern, but still for the purpose of learning, I've mentioned this. Value-added reseller and assembler are not qualified because this scheme is for actual manufacturers. And the group and the company should not be declared as bankrupt. And the very basic condition is that if you are taking one PLI scheme, the same investment and same sale cannot be counted twice for another PLI scheme. They might be product which might be used in different industry. For example, same product can be used in medical industry or in automobile industry. So you need to choose the scheme very carefully and you will be eligible for just one PLI scheme. So what is the selection criteria? Of course, the bigger the investment, the more chances it has to be qualified. If you plan to set up more deeper value chain in India, just standalone manufacturing plant, you will be favorably considered, and large investments will be considered in India. Large investment will be favorably considered for the purpose. Then you have high chances that you will get more portion out of the budget that we initially discussed. So this was just an overview of the air conditioning and LED equipment. Now I will move to another PLI scheme of auto component and automobile. This while I was reading the scheme, it was a very interesting fact. We all know that just auto and automobile sector contributes up to 35% to the India's GDP. So this scheme definitely would attract a lot of companies to evaluate whether they should go in for further investments into India. And I think this is a big motivator and a big argument in favor of investing more in India. So this is basically, as we all can read, this is a scheme for auto and auto component. This was announced very recently, only last month, I think just about a month ago. And it has two components. One is for OEM, original equipment manufacturer. And I have given a brief description of what all is covered in OEM, and also for component incentivization. So those companies who are manufacturing components for automobile are also covered. And again, as the same logic and rationale, the base year is 1920 because 2021 was a very disturbing year in terms of business. So what are the components of the scheme? This scheme is a very forward-looking scheme in my view, because it covers those companies and group entities which are engaged in the auto and auto component sector, and it also covers those companies which are not directly categorized as auto and automobile. For example, if there is any investor who is just investing in any existing automobile or auto component company in India, it could be an Indian company, it could be a Japanese subsidiary, and this company in India should be making an application to the government for eligibility under the scheme. So it's a big opportunity, not just for automobile and component manufacturing companies, but also for those companies which want to make investments, for example, funds which want to make investment in these auto and OEM companies in India, so that they can also grow this company or their investments in India by utilizing these schemes. So for existing auto and auto component scheme, the global revenue should be approximately 100 billion, and for auto component, minimum 50 minimum 50 billion should be the global revenue. Investment amount, global investment of the company or its group company in the fixed asset should be up to 30 billion. Similarly, in auto component, it should be 1.5 billion or 15 billion. It's written here. For new non-automotive investor company or its group company, the thresholds are written here, that you need to have certain number of global net worth. Also, you need to have committed investment as per the criteria, which I will explain in the next slide, in the next 5 years. So this is some key feature of PLI auto and auto component. What are the products which are covered under the scheme? It's called pre-approved advanced automotive technology vehicles, pre-approved advanced automotive technology components for all such vehicles, CKD, completely knockdown kits and semi-knockdown kits for these vehicles and such components, and vehicle aggregates, for example, aggregates which do frames, chassis, fuel system, suspension, axle, wheel, engine, cooling system, engine mounting. So many aggregators. This is the definition of aggregator for two-wheeler, three-wheeler, passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, and tractors. So what are the eligibility criteria? Automotive companies existing presence in India. So they must have global revenue of 100 billion or 5 billion, as I've explained in the previous slide. Existing investment should be in India should be at least 30 billion or 1.5 billion. Incremental investment should be approximately 20 billion. This is written in Nihongo, but I'm speaking in terms of more Indian numericals. I can share the scheme document with you later. 20 billion for OEM for two-wheeler and three-wheeler is 10 billion INR, and for component it's 2.5 billion INR. Non-automotive companies global net worth should be 10 billion as on 31st March 2021, and they need to have a minimum investment of 20 billion or 10 billion. This is cumulative new domestic investment condition, and I have mentioned it in INR and in millions and billions because it will be easier for you to understand rather than Indian nomenclature. So as you can see, 5 years is the tenure of the scheme. 2022-23 it starts. So first year, 31st March 23, second year, 31st March 24, 31st March 25, 26 and 27 will be the financial year. And for OEMs, except two-wheeler and three-wheeler, these are the investment thresholds. For OEMs in two-wheeler and three-wheeler, you need to have this much of investment into the country. For component manufacturers, this is the investment threshold. This is cumulative. So you can see like 4, 10, 17.5, 22, and 25. So you are increasing the investment every year. For example, under this scheme, new non-automotive investor, first year you are investing 30, then 50 more becomes 80, then you investing 60 more becomes 140, 175, and ultimately 20 billion. So like this, for 5 years you need to maintain the investment in India, domestic investment. And then this is how these incentives will be calculated. It looks very complicated slide because I am trying to summarize it, but trust me, if you understand the scheme, you just have to select which category of incentive you are eligible. For example, if you are an OEM, the incentive could be in the range of 13%, to 16% and plus 2% additional if you are into electric vehicle and other segments. OEM companies will receive up to, if you are if your say investments are up to 20 billion, you will receive investment calculated at 13%. If you are in this bracket, then you will be eligible for 15%. If you are up to 40 billion, then you are eligible for 16. So you need to see which bracket your investments will fall. Sorry, this is sales figure. Sorry for the confusion. This is eligible sales. So if your sales are up to 20 billion, then you are only eligible for 13%. Similarly, if your sales are up to 40 billion and above, then you are into 16% bracket. You need to ignore the other brackets. For components, this is for OEM. For components, the incentive rates are 8% to 11%, and then additional 2% if you are into electric vehicle and battery fuel cell, hydrogen. And similarly, this is how the sales turnover has to be achieved. I have mentioned additional incentive. Again, more 5% more will be given in this segment if you are into battery for electric vehicle and hydrogen fuel cell. So this is only to determine how much incentive are eligible for a particular sales amount. And I'm calculating some incentive. Let's say your company is OEM company and your cumulative investments into India are as per the chart here. And you are a non-two-wheeler and three-wheeler OEM. You need to have 1 billion as a base year sales, and incrementally you have to do 12.5 1.25 billion expressed in Japanese, 1.25 billion, and then every year you need to increase 10% of this 12.5 in the first year, then you need to increase 10%, then it becomes like 13.75, it becomes the opening balance, and you do 10% more, becomes 15.12, then it is the opening balance and again 10%. So this is how approximately 1.63 billion will be the incremental sale. Just for an example, it definitely will be more because you're investing so much into the business, but this is, I would say, minimum that you need to achieve to be eligible. And this is how the sales incentive will be calculated. So on over sale of 7.63, a company can achieve nearly 1 billion as an incentive, and 7.63 is a very minimum amount for this level of investment in my view. So I would say that this is a huge incentive for those companies which have already existing auto and auto component business in India. For those companies which are only acting as new investor, for them the base year is 0 because they will make fresh investment and they don't have any track record to show that they have prior investment in India. So the same formula will apply and same level of incentive will happen. And this is a calculation for component manufacturers with the same philosophy as to how to calculate, but in a different format. This is first year, second year, third year, fourth and fifth year, 5 years. New investment like 400 million INR, 1000 million INR, 1750 million INR, 2200 to 2500 and 2500 million. And sales value will be like this, 2.5 and then 10% you are achieving every year. 10% it becomes like this. Total sales, minimum sale has to be 15.28. And if the sales, determined sales means which are eligible, a net of any sales return, these are up to 2,500 million, then the rate of incentive will be 8%. And this is how much you will receive. At 8% and 2,500 million, the total incentive will be 122 million. And similarly for other sales value, your sales incentive will be determined and you will be given incentive like here, this final chart. Very simple calculation that 15.28, if your rate of interest is 10%, then you will achieve 1.528 as an incentive. And for EV battery and fuel cell, and if you achieve 12,500 million, the incentive plus 5%, as I told you in the previous slide, in here, as you will notice, plus 5%, the rate of incentive from 13% will become 18%, and you will achieve 2.750. So this is how, once you understand, it will be simple. It could be hard to understand the first time, but if we can have more discussion, I can explain you in more detail one-on-one. Similarly, because of time shortage, I will just cover PLI for other sector. This was a successful PLI for large-scale electronic manufacturing. This is already, it happened on 31st July 2020, last year, more than 1 year ago. And this was again, second round happened in March 21 because there were more applications. And as you can see, the approved companies for mobile phones, 15,000 rupees and above, Samsung, Foxconn, Pegatron, Winstron, they were the eligible applicant. For mobile phones, domestic companies, these four companies got the mandate. And similarly, for specified electronic component, some big multinational companies were considered for eligibility under the scheme. Then food processing industry, very strong chance for Japanese companies to be present here. There are three categories. So in my view, category 2 is small, 10 million turnover. I'm not sure if any Japanese company would be keen as SME to come to India, but yes, primarily you can focus on category 1, which is ready to cook and ready to eat market, processed food and beverage, marine product. I personally would like to eat a lot of seafood from Japan in India, and mozzarella cheese. The food standards in Japan are too high, and I hope this is seriously considered by various food and beverage companies in Japan. So these are the rate of incentive from financial year 2021, 22, 23, 24, 10%, 10% and 9%, 5 years. And eligibility criteria is as follows, that you need to have minimum sales as per this column and minimum investment as per this column. So in my personal view, category 1, which is dealing large entities who apply for incentive based on sales and investment, should be the focus category for Japanese companies. Slightly more, this is basically for pharmaceutical sector. Total incentive of 1,200 INR million. I should have mentioned it here. 300 and different group A, B, and C. And similarly, category 1, category 2, and category 3 for different kinds of drugs and pharmaceutical. Based on the criteria, the incentive could be 10%, 8%, or 6% in this category 1, category 2 same, and category 3 slightly lower, half the investment value, because it's primarily very itematized market, repurposed drug, autoimmune drugs, etc. This is for telecom and networking product. There are certain eligible product, which is core transmission equipment, 4G and 5G generation radio network. Telecom companies from Japan may be keen. Equipment, enterprise equipment such as routers and switches and other products. So there are certain minimum investment amount to be covered at up to financial year 24-25. This is for high efficiency solar module. I have summarized very briefly, but since we're just running short of time, if you have any questions, you please feel free. This is to encourage the solar power, because as you know, we are looking sometimes at coal shortage, and we don't have too much of atomic power, but we can rely on renewable energy, which is a very big market in India, solar and wind and hydro. So for promote the solar energy utilization, these solar photovoltaic modules increase their manufacture, because right now most of the panels are imported from outside, and mostly from very cheap locations where manufactured. So to make them cheaper in India, the government is keen to give incentive for those companies. Then textile is something that could be a big opportunity. I know some famous companies who are present in India, and there could be more possibilities for other companies. For MMF means man-made fiber, include jersey and pullover, and I've described everything, which are used for professional sports and other activities. Similarly, technical fibers, which are used in geo nets, geogrid, shade nets, and different kind of very specific anti-fog protection nets, etc. Fishing net, diapers, napkins, could be application in nuclear, biological, etc. And there are certain threshold target segment part 1, which says any person, which includes firm or company willing to invest a minimum of 300 3 billion INR in plant machinery, equipment, and civil works, etc. And such company should achieve approximately 6 billion in the sales turnover in a period of 2 years. Similarly, part 2, if you think that this investment is too high, then part 2 allows you to invest up to 1 billion in plant and machinery, and up to you need to achieve 2 billion in terms of sale turnover. So, and there are details for textile sector as well. Other issues, so I've covered major PLIs, but as I told you, there are 13. But there are other issues which, as a professional, I would like you to pay close attention to. Is that under this PLI scheme, you need to be very careful about transfer of technology agreements. Yes, transfer of technology is allowed to be treated as investment, and but you can only treat it up to 5% of the total investment. This scheme also allows you to set up research and development facilities in India, and all the capital expenditure which you will do on R&D facility in India will be categorized as investment in India. Some associated utility means existing investments in India will not be counted, and fresh investments have to be brought in. I think this I have already mentioned in the previous slide, so I will skip. Very carefully, where Japanese companies may have a misunderstanding that investment in land and building will not be categorized as investment under the limit, but I told you that investment in factory building can be treated as eligible investment. Then there are issues related to bank guarantee. So whatever government is giving you on good faith, first year you got it, third year got it. But for example, if any applicant wants to withdraw from the scheme in the next third year, fourth year, or fifth year, then the government may recover the excess incentive paid. Till the time you have achieved the investment and sales turnover, it is fine, you are eligible. But if there is any breach of condition, that can be recovered. But also at the time of starting of the project, if you don't set up the investment within 18 months, the government may recover the incentive which is given to you based on the commitments by way of bank guarantee. And again, here the role of bankers become very important. I will share these slides with you, and then you can consider these 4 conditions and come back to me for any Q&A. Some other areas, as I mentioned, professional, my input is that all these schemes are technical and slightly complicated in the beginning to understand. So study them hard about your eligibility and make decisions faster. I would say there is no, even though some of the schemes have been closed, but if there is a new application, government will definitely consider it, because that is a whole objective. As I showed you, for large manufacturing, they opened the second round. So they could be second round, third round, and the budget could be increased if the results are good. So please don't shy to consider this, even though your sector scheme appears to be closed for now. Preparation of application requires very careful consideration, future thinking, so please consult with professionals. You need to appoint professionals for monitoring of performance as well. So adherence to some terms and conditions are very important. MIS reporting to the project management agency appointed by the government. There are risk of audit, fraud risk, and internal controls have to be very strong. Adequate planning for funding and cash flow management would be required. Banking, external commercial borrowing, treasury management, all the more important now, and government licensing and representation. And then, of course, somebody you can always reach out to who can guide you properly. This is my profile, but I'll just skip now and I move to the closure of my presentation. If you have any queries, please feel free to ask me. Arigato.
Thank you very much, Himanshu-san. かなり、大きな量の、話題を短い間にぎゅっと詰め込みましたので、なかなか身近に感じられないという部分もあったかもしれません。ただ、これからですね、本当に自分の分野、お仕事の分野でですね、これだったらどうなるんだろうというような、疑問でも結構なんですけれども、今、肥満氏が申し上げましたように、説明をきちっとしてもらわないとなかなか理解しづらいという面があるかと思います。どうぞですね、お気軽に肥満種なり、また日本人の担当もおりますので、お声掛けいただいてですね、ご相談をいただければというふうに思います。もし、今何かご質問あればお受けしますけれども、最初に申し上げましたように、一つ一つメールできちんとお答えした方がいいのではないかというふうに私は考えますので、ぜひメールでですね、ご質問をお寄せいただきたいと思います。肥満種へのですね、コンタクト、その他もついでにその時お知らせしますので、どうぞお願いをいたします。ただいまチャットボックスを見ていただくと、 横浜インドセンターさんへのですね、アンケートの用紙に飛ぶ URL が出てると思いますので、ぜひ、アンケートをお答えいただきまして、どうぞご協力をお願いいたします。時間が少しだけ余りましたけれども、本日のですね、セミナー、PLI に関しましては、これにて終了させていただきます。本日はご参加いただきまして、誠にありがとうございました。Thank you very much, Himanshuさん。
Thank you, Konoさん。ありがとうございます。
どうもありがとうございました。